now present For the Record.
Welcome to For the Record. I'm Will Keneally. We start this week in the state legislature, where lawmakers approved a series of election-related proposals. Now, the catch, some of them were bills, like one that the governor is expected to sign, which would allow municipalities to start processing absentee ballots the day before Election Day. But now, some of those proposals come in the form of constitutional amendments. Here's Representative Patrick Snyder speaking at a press conference earlier this week.
Basically, it requires that a photo ID be accompanied with the person voting with every election held in Wisconsin. You know, some of the folks say, well, we already have that in statute, but if you've noticed in the last several budgets of Governor Evers, it's been taken out of consideration. So this will keep it there. It'll also put it back into the hands of the voters.
Now, this is not uncommon for Republicans recently to use the constitutional amendment process to pass policies. That's the focus of a new Wisconsin Watch article, and joining us now is the author, Jack Kelly. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I know Wisconsin does it a little bit differently than the U.S. Constitution. Can you explain what that amendment process looks like?
Yeah, the amendment process here in Wisconsin is a little bit cumbersome. It involves passing a change to the Constitution in 2 consecutive legislative sessions, so in 2 separate but consecutive 2-year periods. And then it's put to voters as a referendum. So they'll weigh in directly on their ballot, yes or no, should this change be made. We had a couple of them on the April 23 ballot with the state Supreme Court race, and there could be several more coming in the next months and year.
So I understand some of these amendments could end up on our ballots that we could see in 2024. What are we looking at in terms of policy-wise?
Yeah, so the big ones stem from some election-related things. One of them is an amendment that would ban municipalities from using outside grant money or private donations to help pay for election administration. Another one would kind of further define what is a qualified elector here in Wisconsin. This amendment is kind of aimed at preventing municipalities from allowing non-citizens to vote in local elections. And so those are kind of the 2 big ones that are working their way through the process still. They are scheduled either to be on the ballot in April of 24 or in November of 24.
And so we're seeing these a lot recently. We saw some earlier this year, possibly some next year. Is this an often occurrence for Wisconsin voters to see these amendments hit their ballots?
Yeah, I would say that they're happening at greater frequency in the last few years than we saw maybe in the previous 20 years. Overall, Wisconsin voters have been asked to weigh in on amending the Constitution about 200 times since the state was formed. There was a peak of those, going back several decades, and it's become less common now. In the last 20 years in Wisconsin, voters have been asked to weigh in on amending the Constitution 10 times, including those 2 in April. And we could see it 3 more times potentially next year. And there are also several constitutional amendments up for first consideration, working their way through the legislature this session.
And so what does this look like on the voters' end? Who gets to set the language? Is it confusing at all when the voter reads that on their ballot?
Yeah, this is a really important question. Lawmakers write the question that appears on the ballot. And sometimes it can be vague and confusing. I mean, you could go back at the April 23 ballot and look at the questions which made changes to the state's bail system. But even beyond that, going back to 2020, the constitutional amendment known as Marcy's Law, there was a lawsuit that challenged the wording of the question, saying that this was too vague. It didn't adequately inform voters to make a decision about amending the Constitution. They were successful in that lawsuit in lower court, but it was eventually reversed, and the state Supreme Court did rule it adequately informed voters. But it was a lawsuit that made it all the way to the state Supreme Court, and just shows that sometimes these questions can be vague, and when you're trying to make these sweeping changes, boiling it down into 2 or 3 sentences on a ballot can be pretty complicated.
So I know, excuse me, the legislature would certainly like to think that they've got their finger on the pulse of Wisconsin voters, but sometimes these get shot down, right? Have we seen any of that happen recently?
The most recent one to be shot down was back, I believe, in 2018, which was an amendment that would have abolished the state treasurer's office. That amendment failed, and that was the most recent one. Of the 10 most recent amendments, 9 of the 10 have been successful. Historically speaking, about 25% of them have failed. They've been asked, voters have been asked to ratify, to either approve or reject an amendment, like I said, about 200 times. I think they've approved about 140 or 150 of them. So it comes in at a rate of about 75% approval, 25% disapproval.
So I understand too, this is kind of that small d Democratic. We don't have like ballot referenda usually for bills here in Wisconsin. It's one of the ways that voters can weigh in. But it also comes at a time where we see the state Supreme Court flip for the liberals. Now liberals and Democrats kind of control two levers of power in state government. Are we seeing these more recently kind of in that context of how power is shaking up here in Wisconsin?
We certainly are. I think if you look at the nature of the amendments that are moving their way through the legislative process and could potentially be posed to voters, you have some things that stem directly from legislation that's been vetoed by Governor Tony Evers. We're seeing that with this ban on using private dollars or private grant money to administer elections. That came from a bill that the governor vetoed. Also codifying existing conservative policy victories. The state's voter ID law. Obviously there was tons of litigation about that going back 8-9 years now. But that is something that Republicans would like to write into the state constitution. And if you look at what the amendment's author says about it, he says, I don't know if the Wisconsin Supreme Court will uphold voter ID, but I'm not willing to take the chance. And the only way to protect it is to put it into the Constitution. You see it with other things, an amendment that would require a 2/3 majority to enact a tax increase. I think Republican lawmakers would probably tell you taxes are still too high in Wisconsin, but they have made progress in cutting taxes over the last couple of budget cycles, and I think that they would see this as a way to lock that in. So, I think these amendments are all about power. That's kind of the through line of all things in Wisconsin politics, it'll be interesting to see how they play out, and certainly we'll be interested to see how voters decide to vote on them.
Well, we'll stay tuned, and we'll catch you reporting at wisconsinwatch.org. Jack Kelly, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, when we come back, a new poll shows a shifting landscape for Wisconsin's presidential election. We'll sit down with Marquette poll director Charles Franklin right after this.
This portion of News 3 Now is sponsored by Madison Gas and Electric.
MG&E, building your community energy company for the future through the power of working together. Committed to cleaner, more sustainable energy, driven by innovation, fostered by shared values. Visit MGE2050.com.
It's here, Wisconsin's newest and most exclusive sports show. Wisconsin Huddle. It's more than just highlights. It's more than X's and O's. It's a dynamic 30-minute weekly special produced for the die-hard fans of Wisconsin athletics. Embark on an exclusive journey into the lives of some of UW's top athletes as we offer an inside look into their world. Watch Wisconsin Huddle Friday nights at 6:30. Brought to you by Ho Chunk Gaming Madison.
At Informed Choice Insurance Agency, we're proud of our 5-star reviews.
My agent Matthew explained everything about Medicare and the needed supplemental insurance. He took the time to show me several different plans and the plus and minuses of each policy.
Andrea was amazing, from her knowledge to her presentation to her skills in navigating complicated and intimidating waters. I cannot emphasize enough how much she helped me and my family.
Need help with your Medicare or Marketplace health plans? Get 5-star service at Informed Choice Insurance Agency.
This is the Ergo Smart Base from Tempur-Pedic, and it responds to snoring, so you don't have to. So no more nudging your partner or sleeping on the other side of the house, because the Tempur Ergo Smart Base actually detects snoring, then automatically adjusts to help reduce it all night, every night.
Save up to $500 on select Tempur-Pedic adjustable mattress sets and get a $300 gift. Denver Mattress, the easiest way to get the right Tempur-Pedic.
MG&E, building your community energy company for the future through the power of working together. Committed to cleaner, more sustainable energy, driven by innovation, fostered by shared values. Visit MGE2050.com.
Welcome back. We've now officially crossed the threshold, and we are less than a year out from next year's presidential election. And that coincided this week with the latest numbers from the Marquette Law School poll, taking the temperature of Wisconsin voters. And here to break down those numbers is poll director Charles Franklin. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So I want to ask about those first top-line numbers. Trump and Biden are essentially neck and neck within the margin of error. Is that what we've seen so far since we've had that poll in June?
Well, in June, we saw Biden actually quite a ways ahead, but that was more than we would have expected in a Wisconsin midterm or a presidential election. This looks much more like the kinds of presidential elections we're used to that are decided by less than a percentage point. Here we have a 2-point margin, but the margin of error is 4.5. So the right way to think about that is this is a toss-up race. Likewise, DeSantis has a 2-point lead over Biden, but that's the same 2 points inside the margin of error. Both of those look like toss-ups.
And so we always talk about this being just a snapshot in time. How much do these poll numbers move kind of in the next 12 months here?
Sure. Well, that's the big question. You know, a movie is made up of a whole lot of still pictures that you stitch together. And that's exactly what the snapshot in time of a poll is. This is where we are today. Then we'll be back with another poll in January. Where are we then? How's it moved? Then where are we in March? Where are we in June? And so on. Look at those over the next 12 months to see whether the images of the candidates have shifted, whether their strengths or weaknesses have changed, and of course, whether the horse race has changed over that time. The reason to do polling today is not because we think it's where the race will turn out, but it's so that we understand where we've been and then how we move over this next 12 months, assuming we move at all, which is another possibility.
Certainly. So your poll was conducted before this latest GOP debate, and we're seeing the Republican field start to narrow a little bit. What does that look like here in Wisconsin?
It's narrowed quite a bit. We really have 3 people over 10% in the GOP side of the primary poll. Donald Trump at 38 is 20 points ahead of Ron DeSantis, who in turn is 7 points ahead of Nikki Haley. But something has changed there. Since June, Haley has gone from 3% to 11, an 8-point rise, and DeSantis has fallen by 12 points, while Trump has gained 7. So that's not inconsistent. In fact, that's very consistent with national polling that's been showing DeSantis declining for a number of months now, Trump rising a bit, and Nikki Haley rising out of those mid-single digits that she was in before. No other Republican candidate is more than 3% in this poll.
So the one candidate that we didn't get to earlier in the head-to-head was Nikki Haley, and she beats Biden by some 9 points.
9 points,
in Wisconsin. What contributes to that? Because she's not, ahead in the GOP polls. Is that independence?
No, I think what it's partly is independence. But it's also that a lot of people, 33% in this poll, say they don't know enough about her to have an opinion. And that includes quite a few Republicans without an opinion of her. She's also not got the same image that Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis have. People are both more vague about what her positions are, but they don't associate her with Trump in the same way that DeSantis also draws some of that Trumpier attitudes. So I think what's going on with Haley is that she's a kind of neutral enough Republican that people with doubts about Joe Biden can express maybe they would go for her, whereas people have such strong opinions about Donald Trump, both pro and con, that none of that really works. So a quick example, when we look at how people say they voted in 2020 and how they're voting now, in a Trump-Biden matchup, it's 95% of Trump's people stay with him, 94% of Biden stay with him. But when we go to Haley, she actually pulls off 15% from Biden voters in 2020. Now, that doesn't mean 12 months from now, if she's the nominee, that she will get such a strong performance. But it's a good illustration about how some prior Biden voters now have qualms. And if you give them a Republican that they don't know as much about and that doesn't elicit the same kind of opposition reflexes, that a Republican could do better against Biden. But again, not a forecast for where we would go. If she were to emerge, we'd want to watch how those opinions change over the next year.
And is that unique to her? Do we see that effect with DeSantis, for example?
No, we don't. And DeSantis is closer to Trump in the way people react. Now, he does lead Biden by 2, so he does do a little bit better. And the biggest difference is the one you mentioned. DeSantis draws more independents, whereas independents are evenly split between Biden and Trump. But also Nikki Haley likewise draws much stronger independent support than the Trump-Biden case.
So I want to look at Wisconsin specifically. We've seen a lot of turnover on the state Supreme Court this August. It flipped the balance for liberals for the first time in more than a decade. You asked about the Supreme Court job approval numbers, and it's net positive. It's the first time I remember seeing that in one of your polls in a while. How does that stack up historically?
Yes, we've actually never asked about the Supreme Court before, but as the court has become more involved in politics, people pay more attention to it. We've now added so that we cover all three branches of government: the governor, which we've always asked, the legislature, which we've only asked about from time to time, and now for the first time, the court. But going forward, my intention is to ask about all three of those so we see how that plays out in this same way over the coming year. Do attitudes shift towards any of those three branches?
I was going to ask too, kind of going down the list, state legislature, net negative, governor, certainly it's a person though at the same time, net positive. Is that an indication of the party that's controlling those institutions?
Well, somewhat, but there's been a little bit of a shift from that. The legislature had a stronger rating back in 2022 when we previously asked the question. You know, we've gone through a budget cycle and the usual conflict between the governor and the legislature. The governor's approval is down a few points, 3 points from where it was in June, but is still over 50% approval. The legislature, though, is down around 40% approval, and the Supreme Court about 51% approval. So governor highest ratings, followed closely by the court, with the legislature down a bit.
And you also asked on the issue of impeachment, just how much people are aware of it. 31% say that they know a lot, 39% say that they know a little, 29% nothing at all. How does that stack up against like other issues that we see that are prevalent?
Yeah, there are a lot of issues that those of us that are around the Capitol a lot or follow politics really closely think should be household conversation. But we really find that a lot of those issues don't penetrate to the broader public who aren't as obsessed with Capitol things as we are. What did stand out on the impeachment question is that Democrats were more than twice as likely to say they'd heard a lot about impeachment than Republicans are. So that raises a question of, if this was on the Republican side about messaging to your constituents, doesn't look like the message got through very well. On the Democratic side, they actually did do advertising and campaigning on, or ads anyway, on impeachment, and it does sure look like their voters got more of that message, though still it wasn't universally known.
And so you changed your methodology for this poll a little bit, 900 voters, which I think is a little bit more than you usually do, and a mix of voter registration lists and this opinion panel. Kind of curious why you did that. Will this fix some of the issues that we saw in 2016?
Well, this is the issue of how many people don't want to answer their telephone when it rings during dinner, or even not during dinner for that matter. And so the whole polling industry has shifted to this newer methodology. We use the voter list, and the company that we work with matches the voter list to email addresses and phone numbers so we can contact people from the voter list. And for those people, we send an email invitation and a text invitation to do the survey online. And if we don't hear back from them, then we call their telephone, including their cell phones, of course. The other part of the interviews are based on an address-based sample where a random sample of mailing addresses is drawn in the state, and then people are contacted by letter with an invitation to take part in polls over the next couple of years. And they do repeated polls, not just for us, but for others. But they've agreed in advance to be polled, so therefore it's a much higher response rate when we go back to them for our poll.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Poll Director Charles Franklin, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And when we come back, UW officials have been putting the pressure on lawmakers to increase funding. We'll hear more from System President Jay Rothman after this.
We're often asked,
is it really free to hire Gruber Law Offices?
the answer is yes. The call, the consultation, free. You pay nothing until we win your case. Gruber Law Offices. One call, that's all.
Get ready for an improved news experience. The all-new Channel 3000 News app is here, tailored for your news the way you want it, with a customizable homepage and faster page loads. Download the Channel 3000 News app, powered by News 3 Now.
My part-time service in the Army National Guard allows me to keep my community and those I care about safe from threats. Learn more about how you too can live and serve part-time close to home by visiting nationalguard.com.
Hello, I'm Tommy Van Ness from the Tommy Van Ness Realty Group. The Tommy Van Ness team has a real passion for real estate and would love to work with you on buying and selling your house. We are a multi-award winning team with over $500 million in sales.
Our strong work ethic and negotiation skills will help guide you through the buying or selling process. If you're considering buying or selling in 2023, now is the time.
Why settle for less? Call Tommy Van Ness.
If you've ever grilled, you know you can count on propane to make everything great. But did you know propane also powers school buses that produce lower emissions that lead to higher test scores? Or that propane can cut your energy costs at home? It powers big jobs and small ones too. From hospitals to hospitality, people rely on propane, an energy source that's affordable, plentiful, and environmentally friendly for everyone. Get the facts at propane.com/now.
Trust Gruber Law Offices to get you back in the game. Our team is available 24/7. Gruber Law Offices, proud partner of your Milwaukee Bucks. One call, that's all.
Welcome back. There are ongoing debates right now over university funding for Wisconsin. Now, the state legislature withheld more than $30 million this past budget cycle, telling the UW that they could use the funds if they promised to eliminate positions in diversity, equity, and inclusion across the university system. Now, our Jalen Banks sat down with System President Jay Rothman to discuss where this is headed.
You know, we continue to have, I think, discussions with legislators, including the Speaker. I remain hopeful that we can find an accord moving forward because there's a lot at stake. There's a pay plan that has been approved by the legislature, enacted into law by the governor, that in my judgment is being withheld from our employees. These are employees who are food service workers, they're custodians, they're administrative assistants, you know, people serving throughout the universities who have mortgage payments to make, rent payments to make, kids to clothe and feed and so forth, and just to live, and they're living in an inflationary environment. And I think withholding compensation that's been approved is simply unfair and it's wrong. We have an engineering building in Madison that needs to be built to provide the number of graduates that our state needs and to house world-class research. I mean, we continue to, I mean, I've been pretty clear, I think, about my views on DE&I. I think it's important. Coming from the private sector, I saw how the private sector viewed it. I was in Milwaukee last week and was at a session that was hosted by Rockwell Automation and Johnson Controls, and they talked about the importance of having a diverse workforce in their companies. So I think the private sector supports it. On the university side, we want to continue to evolve our DE&I efforts around student success. You know, recruiting, retaining, and graduating students, but looking at diversity much more broadly. Certainly it is underrepresented groups without question, but it's veterans, it's disabled students, it's first-generation students, it's students of different religious faiths and beliefs, it is students of different political ideologies. All of that is combined within the concept, from our perspective, of diversity. And if we're going to hit our target of increasing the number of graduates from our universities by 10% by 2028, we need to be inclusive to everyone, and that's important for Wisconsin.
At the center of the funding debate is Assembly Speaker Robin Vos. Now, we asked him earlier in the week about these latest funding negotiations.
So hopefully, once we're able to conclude some kind of a deal on changing how we deal with diversity, equity, and inclusion, we'll be able to have that come up. We have the engineering building, we have the pay raises. They're all kind of part of one big package.
We also asked him specifically about a series of ads run by UW-Madison putting pressure on lawmakers to pass funding for what the campus calls much-needed renovations to its engineering building. Here's what Vos had to say.
I checked with my office. They have done the campaign. We have had 3 people contact my office. So you can say whether or not that's successful. I don't think that we really need an ad campaign to know that we want more highly educated students in Wisconsin to stay here. I think, as I also mentioned, that the programs at Platteville and Green Bay, also excellent engineering programs, aren't full, nor is the one at UW-Milwaukee. So we don't want to say that the only place that a great engineer can be trained is at UW-Madison. That's one of the places, but it's not the only one.
When we come back, the latest on the impeachment watch for the state's top elections official. We'll be right back after this.
Congratulations! It's a new sewing machine from the Electric Needle. It's more accurate than older models and has hassle-free threading. Plus, it comes with free unlimited owner's lessons. Find sewing success at the Electric Needle. Frontage Road off Seminole Highway.
For 15 years, Gilda's Club Madison has provided free emotional support, cancer education, and hope to children and adults facing any kind of cancer. Is someone in your life facing cancer? Support is available in Dane County and virtually throughout Wisconsin. To learn more, visit gildasclubmadison.org so that no one faces cancer alone.
This is Kathy. She's about to see her dentist. She's afraid. Not because of the drill, but because of the bill. A big bill. But Kathy doesn't need to be afraid, and neither do you, thanks to affordable dental insurance from Physicians Mutual Insurance Company. It's easy to get this coverage. Don't believe me? Call or go online for all the details. You could even have this free information kit. This isn't a discount plan or preventive-only coverage. This is real dental insurance. It helps pay for over 400 procedures. That's a lot. I'm talking cleanings, fillings, crowns, bridges, root canals, even dentures. Bottom line, you'll have help paying for routine care and expensive major work. But if you want deductibles, forget it. There aren't any. No annual maximum either. Plus, you can see any dentist you want. Stop fearing the big bill. Start saving at the dentist. Call now or go to sendinfokit.com.
Physicians Mutual, Physicians Mutual.
Congratulations! It's a new sewing machine from the Electric Needle. It's more accurate than older models and has hassle-free threading. Plus, it comes with free unlimited owner's lessons. Find sewing success at the Electric Needle. Frontage Road off Seminole Highway.
Finally this morning, providing a through line for you on one of the stories that we are keeping track of. Republican lawmakers are looking to oust the state's top elections official over continued concerns into the 2020 election. They're moving forward with impeaching her, and the chair of the committee that will handle that process tells us we could see movement in the next week.
We still have time that we need to review it within my office and go from there. So I'll have more thoughts and responses on that next week if it's still an issue at that point.